Hello, family. Welcome to Church Day, where every story feels real. Please get comfortable and enjoy this amazing video to the end. While watching, please drop a comment and let know where you are watching from. Don't forget to like this video and don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any future upload. It truly means a lot to us. Thank you.
The rain started just before the final school bell rang. Students rushed through the front gate laughing, holding expensive phones over their heads while parents waited in shining cars lined across the street. But near the edge of the sidewalk, beside a rusted metal fence soaked with rainwater, one teenage girl stayed behind long after everyone else had gone home. Her name was Emily Carter. Every afternoon, while her classmates disappeared into warm houses and comfortable lives, Emily unfolded a small wooden tray and began selling roasted peanuts and homemade snacks outside the school gate just to help her mother keep food on the table. She tried to avoid eye contact. She tried to smile whenever customers passed by. But that afternoon, something happened that would change the course of her entire life forever. Because hidden somewhere inside that crowd of laughing students was a stranger quietly watching everything. And before this story is over, the same girl people mocked beside that school gate would become the one person nobody could ignore anymore. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Emily had spent almost 2 years hiding the truth about her life from the students at Westbridge High School. Inside the classroom, she looked no different from anyone else. She kept her notebooks neat, answered questions when teachers called on her, and sat quietly near the back of the room hoping nobody would notice the holes forming near the bottom of her shoes. Most students assumed she was shy. Some thought she believed she was better than everyone else because she rarely joined conversations. But the truth was much harder to admit. Emily avoided friendships because friendships required explanations. Friends asked questions about where you lived. Friends wanted to visit your house. Friends eventually noticed when your lunch was only a bottle of water and crackers 3 days in a row. So Emily learned to stay invisible. She learned to laugh softly when others joked around her while never sharing too much about herself. Every morning before school, she woke up at 4:30 to help her mother prepare bags of peanuts and fried pastries in the tiny apartment they rented across town. Her mother worked double shifts cleaning offices at night, but after Emily's father disappeared years earlier, even 2 jobs were never enough to survive comfortably. Rent kept rising. Bills kept arriving. Some nights the electricity shut off without warning, leaving them eating dinner in darkness while pretending everything would somehow get better soon. Still, Emily refused to complain. She believed education was the only thing standing between her family and the life they were trapped inside. While other students spent weekends shopping or attending football games, Emily spent her Saturdays studying in public libraries because the heating there was free during winter. Teachers noticed her intelligence almost immediately. She scored near the top of her class in nearly every subject. But achievement did not protect her from humiliation. In fact, at Westbridge High, success without money only made students stand out even more. Especially students like Jason Miller. Jason came from one of the wealthiest families in the county. His father owned several car dealerships, and everyone at school knew it. Jason wore expensive sneakers before they were officially released in stores. Teachers treated him carefully because his family donated thousands of dollars to school programs every year. Students followed him everywhere because popularity at Westbridge often depended on proximity to wealth. Jason enjoyed attention. He enjoyed controlling rooms with a single joke. And unfortunately for Emily, people like Jason searched constantly for weaknesses in others because humiliating someone weaker made them feel untouchable. For months, Emily managed to keep her after-school life hidden from everyone at school. She waited until most students had left campus before setting up her snack tray outside the gate. Some days she made only $15. Other days she earned enough to buy groceries for the week. But one rainy Thursday afternoon, everything collapsed. Jason and several friends had stayed late after football practice when one of them noticed Emily standing beside the school fence selling peanuts under a broken umbrella. At first they laughed quietly among themselves. Then Jason pulled out his phone. Emily saw him recording and immediately turned her face away, hoping he would get bored and leave. Instead, he walked closer. Much closer. His friends followed behind him laughing while cars passed slowly through the rain-covered street nearby. "Wait a second," Jason shouted loudly enough for students across the parking lot to hear. "Is that Emily? The genius girl from chemistry class?" More students turned around. Some stopped walking entirely. Emily felt her chest tighten. She kept arranging peanut bags on the tray pretending she could not hear him. But Jason continued. "So this is why you never hang out with anyone," he laughed. "You're running a roadside business after school?" A few students laughed nervously while others simply stared. Emily prayed silently for the ground beneath her feet to open and swallow her whole. Then Jason said something she would never forget for the rest of her life. He looked directly into his phone camera, pointed at Emily, and said, "Imagine studying this hard just to end up selling peanuts at the school gate." His friends burst into laughter. One girl covered her mouth in shock. Another student whispered that Jason had gone too far. But nobody stepped forward to stop him. Emily tried holding back tears as students she had spent years sitting beside watched her humiliation spread in real time. Some recorded their own videos. Others uploaded clips online before she even packed her tray away. By the time she finally walked home through the rain that evening, the video had already begun circulating around the entire school. Thousands of views appeared within hours. Comments flooded social media. Some mocked her clothes. Others joked about buying snacks from the peanut girl. Emily reached home soaked from the storm and locked herself inside the bathroom so her mother would not see her crying. She sat on the floor covering her mouth to keep from making noise because she knew if her mother heard her pain, it would break her heart completely. But while Emily believed her life had just been destroyed forever, something else had happened that afternoon. Across the street from the school gate, parked quietly beside a row of wet maple trees, a black SUV remained there longer than usual. Inside sat an older man who had watched the entire incident from beginning to end without saying a single word. He saw the laughter. He saw the phones pointed at Emily's face. And he saw the exact moment she tried pretending she was not hurt while tears filled her eyes anyway. The man stayed inside the vehicle for several minutes after Emily disappeared down the sidewalk. Then slowly, he picked up his phone and made a call. What he said during that conversation would set into motion a chain of events nobody at Westbridge High could have imagined. Stay with us, because what happened to Emily just days later shocked the entire school. By sunrise the next morning, Emily Carter's humiliation had already spread far beyond the walls of Westbridge High School. Students who had never spoken to her before suddenly knew her face. Screenshots from Jason Miller's video moved from phone to phone during breakfast, inside classrooms, on school buses, and across social media pages filled with laughing emojis and cruel comments from people who knew nothing about her life. Some students replayed the clip repeatedly just to hear the moment Jason mocked her in front of everyone. Others pretended to feel sorry for her while secretly enjoying the attention the story brought to the school. And through all of it, one question quietly remained unanswered. Who was the man sitting inside that black SUV watching everything happen? Because whoever he was, he had not looked away when Emily was being humiliated. While everyone else saw a poor girl selling peanuts outside a school gate, the stranger seemed to see something entirely different. Something important enough to make him stay there long after the crowd disappeared. Inside Westbridge High that morning, the atmosphere felt strange. Conversation stopped whenever Emily walked past. Students whispered inside hallways while pretending not to stare directly at her. Some looked uncomfortable with what had happened. Others enjoyed the attention the situation created. Emily kept her head down as she moved through the corridors, clutching her books tightly against her chest. Every vibration from her phone made her stomach twist because new notifications kept appearing every few seconds. More comments. More messages. More clips spreading online. One student had even edited dramatic music behind Jason's recording and uploaded it again with the caption, "The Peanut Queen of Westbridge." Thousands of strangers were now laughing at a girl they had never met. Emily wanted to disappear completely. She thought about turning around and leaving school before first period even started. But she couldn't afford to miss class. Missing school meant risking her grades, and her grades were the only thing she believed could eventually save her mother from the life they were trapped inside. Still, nobody at school understood the real reason Emily sold snacks outside the gate every afternoon. Students assumed she was simply poor. But Emily had hidden far more than financial struggles from everyone around her. 3 years earlier, shortly after her father abandoned the family without warning, her mother suffered a serious back injury while cleaning offices overnight. The injury never healed properly because they could not afford consistent medical treatment. Since then, her mother worked through constant pain every single day just to survive. Emily watched her come home exhausted each morning, barely able to stand upright, yet still forcing herself to smile so her daughter would not worry. There were weeks when prescription medication became more expensive than groceries. Weeks when overdue rent notices piled against the apartment door while Emily pretended not to notice her mother crying quietly at night. Selling peanuts outside the school gate was never about embarrassment or pride. It was survival. It was the difference between eating dinner and going hungry. But Emily carried that burden alone because she could not bear the thought of becoming another object of pity inside a school where wealth determined how much respect people received. As whispers spread through Westbridge High, Jason Miller enjoyed every second of the attention. He walked through the hallways proudly showing classmates how many views his video had already gained overnight. Some students laughed along with him while others began feeling uncomfortable watching how far things had gone. Teachers had started hearing about the incident too, though most only knew pieces of the story. By lunchtime, students gathered around tables discussing Emily as if she were no longer a real person but some kind of entertainment everyone suddenly owned. Yet hidden inside all the gossip and laughter was growing curiosity. People wanted answers. Why had Emily hidden her life for so long? Why was she selling outside the school gate instead of working somewhere else? And more importantly, who exactly was the mysterious older man seen briefly standing near the black SUV in the background of one student's blurry recording? Some students barely noticed him. Others became convinced he was connected to Emily somehow. Rumors spread quickly. One person claimed he was a relative. Another said he worked for the school district. But nobody truly knew. Meanwhile, Emily sat alone inside the library during lunch, trying desperately to avoid everyone around her. She stared silently at dozens of unread messages appearing across her phone screen while pretending to focus on homework. Some messages mocked her openly. Others offered sympathy that somehow felt even worse. Then one notification appeared that immediately caught her attention. It came from an unknown number with only a short message attached. Please report to the principal's office tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. No explanation. No signature. Just those words. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken instantly. Her mind raced through terrifying possibilities. Had the school decided she was damaging their reputation? Was she about to be suspended because of the video? Had someone complained about her selling outside the school gate? For the rest of the day, she struggled hearing anything teachers said because fear kept replaying every possible outcome inside her head. By the time school ended, she could barely breathe from anxiety. That evening, Emily almost decided not to return to school at all. She sat beside her bedroom window listening to rain tap softly against the glass while her mother slept exhausted in the next room. The apartment felt painfully quiet. Emily kept replaying Jason's words over and over inside her mind. Imagine studying this hard just to end up selling peanuts at the school gate. For the first time in years, she wondered if maybe all her effort truly meant nothing. Maybe students like Jason were right. Maybe people born into poverty never really escaped it no matter how hard they worked. But deep down, another thought troubled her even more. Why had that stranger been watching her so carefully? And why couldn't she stop thinking about the look on his face while everyone else laughed? Because unlike the others, he had not smiled once. He looked angry. Almost heartbroken. And before this story would finally unfold completely, the same students mocking Emily Carter online would soon find themselves standing silently in shock at something nobody inside Westbridge High saw coming. Long before students at Westbridge High began calling Emily Carter the Peanut Girl, she was simply a quiet child trying to survive a life that had become difficult far too early. Emily grew up in a worn-down neighborhood on the edge of the city where broken streetlights flickered through the night and old apartment buildings leaned slightly from years of neglect. Most people living there worked 2 or 3 jobs and still struggled to pay rent every month. The walls inside Emily's apartment were thin enough to hear neighbors arguing through the night, and during winter, cold air slipped through cracks near the windows no matter how many blankets her mother taped across them. Yet despite everything around her, Emily learned very young how to carry herself with dignity. She rarely complained. She rarely asked for help. And she became skilled at hiding pain behind polite smiles because she understood her mother already carried enough burdens of her own. Emily's father had walked out of their lives when she was only 11 years old. One evening he promised he was leaving town temporarily for work, kissed her forehead goodbye, and never returned again. At first Emily's mother kept making excuses, insisting he would eventually come back home. But after months passed without calls or messages, reality became impossible to ignore. Bills started piling up quickly afterward. Her mother picked up extra cleaning jobs during evenings, washing office floors and scrubbing bathrooms long after midnight while Emily stayed home alone finishing homework under weak kitchen lights. Some nights her mother returned so exhausted she could barely remove her shoes before falling asleep on the couch. Emily often covered her with blankets quietly before going back to studying because she knew education represented their only possible escape from the life swallowing them little by little. There were evenings when the refrigerator contained almost nothing except old milk and leftover bread. Emily became used to pretending she was not hungry so her mother would eat instead. Sometimes her mother lied about already having dinner at work just to make sure Emily had enough food. Other times they stretched canned soup across 2 entire days because payday still felt painfully far away. Yet even during their hardest moments, Emily's mother never stopped encouraging her daughter to dream bigger than their circumstances. She constantly reminded Emily that difficult beginnings did not decide how a story ended. Those words stayed with Emily everywhere she went. While other teenagers spent weekends shopping at malls or attending parties, Emily spent most afternoons inside libraries or sitting near the apartment window studying borrowed textbooks until late at night. When electricity shut off because bills went unpaid, she used candles to continue reading while rain tapped softly outside their building. She refused to allow poverty to become an excuse for giving up. At Westbridge High School, very few students realized Emily was actually one of the brightest students in the entire building. Teachers quietly discussed her remarkable grades during faculty meetings. Her essays impressed instructors. Her science projects regularly scored highest in class. Guidance counselors believed she had the potential to earn scholarships to top universities someday if she could maintain her performance. But intelligence alone did not protect students from feeling invisible. Emily noticed quickly how social status worked inside Westbridge High. Students from wealthy families dominated conversations, sports teams, parties, and friendships, while students from struggling backgrounds often stayed unnoticed near the edges of school life. Emily adapted by becoming quiet. She avoided discussing personal matters. She never invited classmates home. She laughed politely during conversations without revealing much about herself because she feared what would happen if people discovered the truth about her life outside school walls. Every afternoon after classes ended, Emily changed into older clothes inside a gas station restroom several blocks away before returning to the school gate carrying her tray of peanuts and homemade pastries. She prayed constantly that nobody from school would ever see her there. The humiliation terrified her more than exhaustion itself. Some evenings she stood outside for hours in freezing temperatures trying to earn enough money for groceries while watching expensive cars pick up students whose lives seemed impossibly far removed from her own. Yet despite the hardship, Emily never stopped believing she could eventually become something greater. Deep inside, she dreamed of becoming an attorney one day. She wanted to defend people who felt powerless because she understood exactly what powerlessness felt like. She imagined buying her mother a real house someday. A safe place without leaking ceilings or unpaid utility notices taped to the door. Those dreams kept her moving even during moments when hope felt dangerously fragile. But hidden beneath Emily's determination was constant fear. Fear that one mistake could destroy the carefully balanced life she had built between school and survival. Fear that classmates would laugh if they ever discovered where she went after classes ended each day. Fear that all her hard work might still never be enough to escape poverty. And unfortunately, the moment she feared most finally arrived on that rainy afternoon outside the school gate when Jason Miller stopped walking, pulled out his phone, and discovered the secret Emily Carter had spent years desperately trying to hide from the world. The afternoon everything changed began like any other day at Westbridge High School. Students poured out through the front entrance laughing loudly while expensive cars lined the curb waiting to take them home. Some carried designer backpacks. Others talked excitedly about weekend plans, football games, and parties their parents would probably never know about. Teachers crossed the parking lot carrying coffee cups while security guards prepared to close the front gates for the evening. And standing quietly near the edge of the sidewalk, trying desperately not to attract attention, Emily Carter unfolded her small wooden tray beside the school fence exactly the way she had done hundreds of times before. She arranged bags of roasted peanuts carefully in neat rows while keeping her eyes lowered toward the ground. The air smelled of rain and gasoline as traffic moved slowly along the crowded street nearby. Emily prayed silently that she could finish selling quickly before anyone from school noticed her standing there. But on that particular afternoon, fate had already placed the wrong person directly in her path. Jason Miller had just finished football practice when he and several friends walked toward the parking lot joking loudly among themselves. Jason enjoyed attention more than almost anything else. Inside Westbridge High, his family's wealth made him feel untouchable. Teachers overlooked his behavior because his father donated large sums of money to school programs every year. Students followed him because popularity often came easier when standing beside someone powerful. Jason understood that influence very well, and he used it constantly. To him, people struggling financially existed as entertainment. He mocked students wearing old clothes. He laughed at anyone working part-time jobs. And whenever someone appeared vulnerable, Jason pushed harder because humiliating others gave him a strange sense of control. That afternoon, one of his friends suddenly stopped walking after spotting Emily near the school gate. "Wait," the boy laughed quietly. "Isn't that Emily Carter from chemistry class?" Jason looked toward the sidewalk, narrowed his eyes for a moment, and then slowly smiled. The kind of smile that usually meant trouble for someone nearby. At first, Emily hoped they would simply keep walking. She avoided looking directly at them while pretending to focus on arranging her snacks. But Jason changed direction immediately and started walking straight toward her with several students following close behind him. More teenagers slowed down nearby, sensing drama was about to happen. Emily felt panic rising inside her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for another peanut bag, silently begging herself to remain calm. Then Jason pulled out his phone. The moment Emily saw the camera pointed toward her face, she understood instantly that her worst fear was finally becoming reality. "Yo, everybody look at this," Jason shouted loudly enough for students across the parking lot to hear him clearly. Several people turned around immediately. Others moved closer out of curiosity. The smartest girl in school is secretly selling peanuts outside the gate. Laughter spread through the growing crowd while phones slowly appeared in more students' hands. Emily tried stepping backward, but there was nowhere to go. She was trapped between the school fence and dozens of staring faces. Jason moved even closer, still recording. "Come on, Emily," he laughed. "Why didn't you tell us you owned a little roadside business?" His friends burst into laughter behind him while someone in the crowd repeated the joke loudly. Emily kept her eyes lowered toward the tray, hoping the humiliation would end quickly if she stayed silent. But Jason was enjoying himself too much to stop. "Imagine studying all day just to sell peanuts after school," he said while shaking his head dramatically at the camera. "This is actually embarrassing." More laughter erupted around her. One student whispered that Jason should leave her alone, but nobody stepped forward to defend Emily directly. The fear of becoming the next target kept everyone frozen in place. Emily felt heat rising into her face as tears gathered painfully in her eyes. She wanted to disappear. Every cruel laugh sounded louder than the traffic around her. Every phone camera felt like another piece of her dignity being stripped away publicly while people watched. Then Jason said the sentence Emily would replay inside her mind for weeks afterward. He pointed directly toward her tray and laughed, "Look everybody, the school genius is now a roadside seller." The crowd exploded with laughter again. Someone behind him nearly dropped their phone from laughing so hard. Another student started chanting "Peanut Girl" repeatedly while others joined in. Emily bit her lip hard, trying desperately not to cry in front of everyone. She could feel tears pressing against her eyes, but she refused to let them see her break completely. Her mother had worked too hard for that. She thought about all the nights they survived on almost nothing. All the mornings she woke before sunrise helping prepare snacks before school. All the sacrifices hidden behind that tiny wooden tray beside the gate. And now every painful secret she had protected for years was being turned into public entertainment by people who had never struggled a single day in their lives. But while Jason Miller continued mocking Emily Carter in front of the crowd, he failed to notice something important happening nearby. Across the street, partially hidden behind rows of parked vehicles, a black SUV remained motionless near the curb. Inside sat the same older man who had quietly watched Emily the previous afternoon. This time, however, he heard every word clearly. He saw Jason recording the humiliation. He saw students laughing while Emily fought back tears. And as the crowd continued mocking her outside the school gate, the expression on the stranger's face slowly changed from concern into something far more serious. Because unlike everyone else standing there that afternoon, he understood exactly how dangerous public humiliation could become once the internet got involved. And before Jason Miller realized who had been listening nearby, his own life was about to change in ways he never expected. Across the street from Westbridge High School, beyond the noise of students laughing and phones recording Emily Carter's humiliation, a black SUV remained parked quietly beneath a row of rain-covered trees. Most people passing by never noticed the vehicle at all. Their attention stayed fixed on the growing crowd surrounding Emily near the school gate. But inside that SUV sat a man who had been watching far longer than anyone realized. He appeared to be somewhere in his late 50s, dressed in a dark coat with silver hair beginning to fade along the sides of his head. His face remained calm, but his eyes never left Emily for a single moment while Jason Miller continued mocking her publicly. Unlike the students standing nearby laughing at the scene, the older man looked deeply disturbed by what he was witnessing. There was something about the way Emily stood there trying not to cry that seemed painfully familiar to him. Almost as if he had seen that same expression somewhere many years earlier and never managed to forget it. The man's name was Daniel Whitmore, though nobody at Westbridge High knew who he was yet. Years earlier, Daniel had built one of the largest logistics companies in the state after growing up in circumstances painfully similar to Emily's own life. Few people knew the truth about his childhood because wealth had hidden those memories behind expensive suits, corporate interviews, and magazine articles praising his success. But Daniel never forgot what poverty felt like. He remembered nights when his mother skipped meals so he could eat. He remembered classmates laughing at holes in his shoes while teachers pretended not to notice. And more than anything, he remembered the shame of trying to survive while wealthier people treated struggle like entertainment. Watching Jason Miller humiliate Emily outside that school gate awakened memories Daniel spent years trying to bury. For a moment, he no longer saw a teenage girl selling peanuts in the rain. He saw his younger sister Claire standing outside a grocery store decades earlier, crying after classmates mocked her for working after school to support their family. Claire had died years ago from an illness their family could not afford to treat properly at the time. Since then, Daniel carried a quiet guilt that success never fully erased. Inside the SUV, Daniel remained silent while the scene unfolded outside. His driver glanced toward him several times, sensing the unusual tension filling the vehicle. Daniel rarely reacted emotionally in public. Business associates described him as calm, disciplined, almost impossible to disturb. Yet now his jaw tightened slightly every time another student laughed at Emily. He watched her lower her head while pretending the insults were not hurting her. He noticed how tightly she gripped the edges of the wooden tray to stop her hands from trembling. And when Jason shouted, "Look everybody, the school genius is now a roadside seller," Daniel slowly removed his glasses and stared through the rain-covered windshield with visible disappointment. Not toward Emily. Toward the crowd. Toward a world where kindness had become so rare that people recorded another human being suffering instead of helping them. What disturbed Daniel most was not simply the cruelty itself. It was the reaction of everyone around it. Students laughed. Others watched silently. Some teachers passed nearby without fully understanding what was happening. Nobody stepped forward to protect the girl standing alone beside that fence. Daniel understood something dangerous about humiliation in the digital age. Once shame spread online, it followed people everywhere. One cruel moment could destroy confidence for years. And judging from the number of phones recording Emily, he knew this incident would not stay confined to school gossip for very long. The internet could turn strangers into targets overnight. Daniel had seen it happen before. That realization stayed with him long after Emily finally packed her tray and disappeared down the rain-covered sidewalk trying to hide tears from everyone around her. For several minutes after the crowd scattered, Daniel remained inside the SUV without speaking. Then finally, he reached into his coat pocket, removed his phone, and made a call. His voice stayed low and controlled throughout the conversation, but his words carried unusual urgency. "I need information on a student at Westbridge High," he said quietly. "Her name is Emily Carter." The person on the other end asked several questions Daniel did not answer immediately. Instead, he continued staring through the windshield toward the empty school gate where Emily had stood moments earlier. Something about her deeply unsettled him in ways he could not fully explain. It was not only the poverty. It was the determination hidden underneath the humiliation. Even while being mocked publicly, Emily had refused to beg for sympathy. Daniel recognized that kind of strength because he once carried it himself. And for the first time in many years, he felt something pulling him toward a stranger's life in a way that seemed impossible to ignore. That evening, while social media continued spreading clips of Emily Carter across the internet, Daniel Whitmore sat alone inside his office reviewing information someone had quietly gathered for him within hours. Academic records. Attendance reports. Scholarship evaluations. Teacher comments praising Emily's intelligence and discipline. The deeper he looked, the more disturbed he became by the contrast between her performance at school and the life she appeared forced to live outside it. One note from a guidance counselor described Emily as one of the most promising students Westbridge High has seen in years. Another mentioned concerns about financial hardship affecting her future college opportunities. Daniel leaned back slowly in his chair after reading the reports, thinking carefully for several moments. Then he made another call. This time to Westbridge High School directly. By the time the conversation ended, arrangements had already begun quietly unfolding behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Emily Carter spent that same evening believing her future was collapsing around her completely. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard students laughing again outside the school gate. She imagined returning to school only to face more whispers, more videos, more humiliation waiting around every hallway corner. Several times during the night, she considered never going back at all. But just after sunrise the next morning, while preparing quietly for school beside the small kitchen table in her apartment, Emily's phone vibrated with a message that instantly made her heart stop. The screen displayed only a few simple words. Report to the principal's office immediately upon arrival. No explanation. No details. And in that moment, Emily Carter became certain her life was about to change forever. The drive to Westbridge High School that morning felt longer than usual for Emily Carter. Every terrible possibility kept replaying inside her mind while she stared silently through the bus window watching rainwater slide across the glass. Her stomach twisted with anxiety each time she imagined stepping inside the principal's office. She had spent the entire night convincing herself that the school administration probably wanted to suspend her for selling outside the school gate. Maybe parents had complained after the video spread online. Maybe teachers believed she had embarrassed the school publicly. The humiliation from the previous afternoon still clung to her heavily, making every whisper from nearby students feel personal even before she reached campus. As soon as she walked through the front entrance that morning, she noticed classmates staring at her again. Some lowered their eyes awkwardly. Others whispered immediately after she passed by. Several students were still replaying Jason Miller's video on their phones while pretending not to notice her watching. Emily tightened her grip around her backpack straps and walked quickly toward the principal's office, trying not to panic. Outside the office doors, she paused for several seconds before knocking softly. Her heartbeat pounded so hard she could barely hear anything else. When the principal finally called her inside, Emily stepped into the room expecting anger, disappointment, maybe even punishment. Instead, the moment she looked up, she froze completely. Sitting quietly beside the principal's desk was the same older man she had seen briefly across the street during the incident outside the school gate. The man from the black SUV. The mysterious stranger who had watched everything happen while students laughed at her. Daniel Whitmore stood slowly as Emily entered, his expression calm but serious. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Emily felt confusion crash against her fear all at once. She looked toward Principal Harris searching for answers, but even the principal seemed unusually tense that morning. "Emily," Principal Harris said carefully, "this is Mr. Daniel Whitmore." The name immediately sounded familiar. Almost everyone in the state knew it. Daniel Whitmore was one of the most successful businessmen in the region, founder of Whitmore Logistics, a company worth millions of dollars with offices across several cities. Emily suddenly felt even more confused. Why would someone like him be sitting inside her school principal's office asking to see her? Daniel motioned gently toward the chair across from him. "Please sit down, Emily," he said quietly. His voice carried none of the coldness or superiority she expected from wealthy people. If anything, he sounded strangely sympathetic. Emily sat cautiously while trying to avoid eye contact, embarrassed remembering he had witnessed the entire incident outside the school gate. For several moments the room remained silent except for rain tapping softly against the office windows. Then Daniel finally spoke again. "I saw what happened yesterday," he said. Emily immediately lowered her eyes toward the floor, shame washing over her all over again. She expected pity. Maybe even another lecture about dignity or school image. But Daniel surprised her completely with what he said next. "I know exactly what it feels like to be humiliated for being poor." Emily looked up slowly, almost unable to believe she heard him correctly. Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression distant for a moment as though revisiting memories he rarely discussed openly. "People see success now," he continued quietly. "They see money, companies, interviews. But they don't see the years before any of that existed. They don't see the nights my mother cried because we couldn't pay bills. They don't see the jobs I worked as a teenager just to survive." Principal Harris watched silently while Daniel spoke. Even he seemed surprised hearing such personal details shared so openly. Daniel glanced briefly toward Emily before continuing. "When I looked at you yesterday, I didn't see weakness. I saw determination. Most people in your situation would have quit already." Emily felt tears threatening her eyes again, but this time for completely different reasons. Nobody outside her mother had ever spoken about her struggles with understanding instead of judgment. Daniel reached into a folder resting beside him and slid several papers gently across the desk toward her. "I spent last night reviewing your academic records," he explained. "Your teachers believe you're one of the most talented students this school has seen in years." Emily stared down at the papers in shock. Scholarship forms. Academic evaluations. University preparation programs. She looked back up slowly, still struggling to understand what was happening. Then Daniel said the words that completely changed the atmosphere inside the room. "I want to offer you a full scholarship through the Whitmore Foundation." For a moment, Emily genuinely believed she misunderstood him. The room felt strangely quiet after those words left his mouth. "A scholarship?" she whispered almost inaudibly. Daniel nodded. "Full tuition support. Academic mentoring. College preparation. Everything you need to continue your education without carrying this burden alone anymore." Emily could barely breathe. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the documents again. The opportunity sounded impossible. Unreal. The kind of thing that happened to people in movies, not girls who sold peanuts outside school gates because their refrigerator at home was nearly empty half the time. Principal Harris cleared his throat softly before speaking. "Mr. Whitmore's foundation supports high-achieving students facing financial hardship," he explained carefully. "And after reviewing your academic performance, he believes you qualify." But despite the hopeful words filling the office, tension still lingered underneath the conversation. Principal Harris seemed nervous. Almost hesitant. As though he understood complications were already beginning outside those office walls. Because while Emily sat inside receiving the most unexpected opportunity of her life, rumors had already started spreading across campus. Students noticed Daniel Whitmore's black SUV parked outside the administration building that morning. Some recognized him immediately. Others began whispering after hearing Emily had been called into the principal's office privately. By lunchtime, speculation spread rapidly through the school hallways. Some students assumed Emily was being expelled. Others guessed she had gotten herself into legal trouble after the viral video. But when word slowly leaked that one of the richest businessmen in the state was personally meeting with her, reactions changed instantly. Curiosity turned into jealousy almost overnight. Several students who mocked Emily the previous day now pretended they had always supported her. Others became bitter, insisting she was only receiving attention because people felt sorry for her. And no one reacted more angrily than Jason Miller. Jason first heard about the meeting while sitting in the cafeteria surrounded by friends. At first he laughed it off, convinced the rumors were exaggerated. But once someone showed him a photo secretly taken of Daniel Whitmore entering the school that morning, his expression changed immediately. Jason recognized the name very well. His father had spent years trying unsuccessfully to secure business partnerships with Whitmore Logistics. The idea that Emily Carter, the same girl he publicly humiliated outside the school gate, was suddenly receiving private attention from someone as powerful as Daniel Whitmore made anger rise inside him instantly. Worse still, Jason realized something dangerous. The viral video he uploaded yesterday was still spreading online rapidly. And if Daniel Whitmore had truly witnessed everything that happened outside the school gate, then Jason Miller may have just humiliated the wrong person in front of someone capable of changing his future completely. Emily Carter walked out of Principal Harris's office that morning feeling emotions she could barely process all at once. Fear. Confusion. Hope. For the first time in years, someone powerful had looked directly at her circumstances and offered help instead of judgment. Yet the moment she stepped back into the school hallway, reality reminded her how quickly kindness could become another reason for cruelty. Students immediately noticed the folder clutched tightly against her chest. Conversation stopped as she passed by. Eyes followed her down the corridor. Some classmates whispered openly while pretending she could not hear them. Others stared with expressions filled less with sympathy and more with suspicion. By lunchtime, rumors had already spread through nearly every classroom at Westbridge High. Some students claimed Emily had invented her poverty story for attention. Others insisted she somehow manipulated Daniel Whitmore emotionally after the video outside the school gate went viral online. The same people who laughed at her humiliation now questioned whether she deserved help at all. And with every new rumor spreading through the hallways, Emily felt the fragile hope growing inside her begin collapsing once again. Social media only made everything worse. Overnight, clips of Jason Miller mocking Emily had transformed into endless debates online involving thousands of strangers who knew nothing about her actual life. Some comments defended her. Others accused her of pretending to struggle financially just to gain sympathy from wealthy donors. One post claimed her mother secretly owned businesses in another city. Another falsely suggested Daniel Whitmore was somehow related to her. People edited fake stories together so confidently that complete strangers started believing them without question. Emily sat silently in the school library during lunch scrolling through cruel comments while tears gathered slowly in her eyes again. She played the victim perfectly. Funny how poor people suddenly get opportunities after crying online. Bet she planned the whole thing. Every sentence felt like another attack against the dignity she had fought so hard to protect. She wanted desperately to explain the truth to everyone, but deep down she understood something painful. People often preferred entertaining lies over uncomfortable truth. Meanwhile, Jason Miller watched the situation unfold with growing bitterness. At first, he convinced himself Emily's sudden attention would disappear quickly. But each passing day only increased discussions about her across school and online. Teachers started speaking positively about resilience and bullying during classes. Several students openly criticized Jason for uploading the original video. Worst of all, Daniel Whitmore's foundation officially confirmed interest in supporting Emily's education financially. To Jason, it felt as though the girl he publicly humiliated was somehow becoming admired instead of destroyed. That possibility infuriated him deeply. Jason spent years building his reputation around popularity and influence inside Westbridge High. He could not tolerate watching sympathy shift towards someone he considered beneath him socially. So rather than stepping back, Jason became more aggressive privately. He encouraged friends to spread rumors questioning Emily's honesty. Anonymous social media pages suddenly appeared mocking her scholarship opportunity. Fake screenshots circulated claiming Emily begged wealthy people online for money. None of it was true. But once gossip spreads widely enough, truth often struggles catching up. At home, the emotional pressure became almost unbearable for Emily. She tried pretending everything was fine around her mother, but exhaustion slowly exposed the pain she carried inside. One evening after returning from school, Emily locked herself inside the bathroom and cried quietly for nearly an hour while cruel comments continued appearing across her phone screen. She had survived poverty for years. She had survived hunger, loneliness, and exhaustion. But public humiliation felt different because there was nowhere to hide from it. Every hallway at school reminded her people were talking about her. Every phone notification threatened another insult from strangers. Even the scholarship opportunity that should have changed her life positively now seemed surrounded by suspicion and jealousy. Emily began wondering if accepting Daniel Whitmore's help had only made her life worse. That night, while rain fell softly outside their apartment building, Emily finally broke down completely in front of her mother for the first time since the incident began. Sitting at the small kitchen table, she admitted everything. The video. The laughter. The rumors spreading online. The scholarship offer. And finally, through tears she could no longer control, Emily whispered the thought she had secretly carried for days. Maybe I should just leave school. Her mother stared at her silently for several moments, heartbroken by the exhaustion visible across her daughter's face. Then slowly, she reached across the table and held Emily's trembling hands tightly. "Listen to me carefully," she said softly. "People who have never struggled will never understand what strength truly looks like. But God sees every tear nobody else notices." Emily lowered her head, crying harder while her mother pulled her gently into an embrace. It was the kind of embrace only mothers give when words no longer feel strong enough to protect someone they love. Later that same night, long after Emily finally fell asleep exhausted from crying, her mother remained awake alone inside the dark apartment. She knelt quietly beside the couch with her hands clasped tightly together, whispering prayers through tears for her daughter's future. She prayed for strength, for protection, for peace. She prayed that Emily would not give up after fighting so hard for so many years. Outside, distant thunder echoed softly across the city while the apartment remained almost completely silent except for her whispered prayers. It was one of the most painful nights their family had experienced in years. And neither of them realized that somewhere else across town, another chain of events had already begun unfolding quietly behind the scenes. Because while Emily struggled emotionally under the weight of public humiliation, Jason Miller made a decision driven entirely by anger and jealousy. Determined to destroy any sympathy people felt toward Emily, he uploaded something online that he believed would finally ruin her reputation completely. But Jason had no idea that his latest move contained one critical mistake. A mistake involving footage he never realized someone else had access to. And before the next school day ended, that single mistake would expose far more than Jason Miller ever intended anyone to see. The following morning, tension filled the hallways of Westbridge High School long before first period even began. Students gathered in clusters whispering nervously while teachers moved quickly between classrooms speaking in unusually serious tones. Something had happened overnight, though nobody seemed completely certain what it was yet. Emily Carter noticed the strange atmosphere immediately the moment she stepped onto campus. Conversation stopped when she walked by. Several students looked away guiltily instead of laughing like before. Others stared at their phones with expressions of shock spreading slowly across their faces. Emily felt anxiety tightening in her chest again. After everything she had already endured during the past few days, she feared another humiliating rumor had probably surfaced online while she slept. But this time, the truth moving through Westbridge High was very different from anything students expected. Just before lunch, an announcement suddenly interrupted classes across the entire school. Principal Harris's voice echoed through every classroom speaker requesting all students and staff report immediately to the auditorium for an emergency assembly. The unusual seriousness in his tone immediately unsettled everyone. Students exchanged confused looks while teachers quietly instructed them toward the hallways. Emily followed the crowd uncertainly, her stomach twisting with nervous anticipation. She noticed Jason Miller several rows ahead laughing confidently beside his friends as though he still believed he controlled the situation completely. But hidden beneath his confidence was growing unease. Earlier that morning, Jason's father had received a phone call from someone connected to the school administration. The conversation ended abruptly, but Jason overheard enough to understand one frightening detail. The school had obtained additional footage from the afternoon outside the school gate. Footage Jason never knew existed. Inside the auditorium, hundreds of students settled into their seats beneath a heavy silence unlike anything Westbridge High had experienced in years. Teachers stood along the walls looking unusually tense while Principal Harris remained near the stage speaking quietly with several administrators. Emily sat alone near the back hoping desperately not to attract attention again. Then suddenly, the large projector screen above the stage flickered to life. Principal Harris stepped forward slowly, his expression harder than students had ever seen before. What occurred outside this school several days ago, he began firmly, does not represent the values of this institution. The room fell completely silent. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat while several students immediately turned toward him. Principal Harris continued speaking, disappointment visible across his face. Over the past 48 hours, edited videos and false narratives have spread online targeting one of our students. But this morning, new information came to our attention that changes everything. Without another word, Principal Harris nodded toward the projection booth. Seconds later, security footage from outside the school gate appeared on the massive screen above the auditorium stage. Gasps spread instantly throughout the room. Unlike the short edited clips Jason uploaded online, this footage showed the entire incident exactly as it happened from beginning to end. Students watched in stunned silence as Emily Carter quietly arranged peanut bags beside the fence before Jason Miller approached her with his phone already recording. Every cruel word echoed clearly through the auditorium speakers. Every laugh. Every insult. Every moment Emily tried lowering her head to avoid crying publicly. But what shocked students most was discovering how heavily Jason had manipulated the original video online. The footage revealed he deliberately edited clips to remove moments where students expressed discomfort or told him to stop. He added cruel captions afterward mocking Emily's poverty even further before uploading the video publicly. The truth was now impossible to deny. This had never been harmless joking between classmates. It was calculated humiliation. As the footage continued playing, the atmosphere inside the auditorium changed completely. Students who laughed days earlier now sat frozen with visible shame across their faces. Some lowered their eyes, unable to continue watching. Others glanced nervously toward Emily sitting quietly near the back. Several girls appeared close to tears after finally witnessing the full reality of what happened outside the school gate. The same internet jokes that entertained people days earlier suddenly looked cruel and heartless beneath the harsh honesty of unedited truth. Meanwhile, Jason Miller's confidence disappeared completely. His face turned pale as whispers spread rapidly throughout the auditorium. He looked toward his friends searching desperately for support, but even they avoided eye contact now. For the first time since the incident began, Jason realized something terrifying. He was no longer controlling the story. Then Principal Harris said something that caused even greater shock throughout the room. "There is another person here today who witnessed this incident personally," he announced. And he requested the opportunity to address the student body directly. Confused murmurs spread immediately through the auditorium as students looked around uncertainly. Then from the side of the stage, Daniel Whitmore walked slowly into view. The reaction was immediate. Students whispered his name in disbelief while teachers straightened visibly with respect. Jason stared toward the stage completely stunned. He had never imagined someone as powerful as Daniel Whitmore would involve himself publicly in what happened outside the school gate. Daniel stood quietly for several moments looking across the auditorium filled with students who now understood the weight of their actions much differently than before. His voice remained calm when he finally spoke, but every word carried enormous weight. "I grew up poor," Daniel said quietly. "Poor enough to understand what hunger feels like. Poor enough to understand what embarrassment feels like when people mock your struggle instead of helping you survive it." The auditorium remained completely silent. "And I want every student sitting here today to understand something clearly." Daniel paused briefly before continuing. "A child working to feed her family is not shameful. Mocking poverty is." The words landed heavily across the room. Several students immediately began clapping. Then more joined. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted into loud applause that echoed against the walls around them. Emily sat frozen in shock while tears filled her eyes again, except this time they came from something she had not felt in days. Relief. Validation. Dignity finally returning after being publicly stripped away. But while applause thundered throughout the auditorium, Jason Miller sat completely motionless, realizing his life at Westbridge High had just changed forever. Because Daniel Whitmore was not finished speaking yet. And what he revealed next would send another wave of shock through the entire school. The applause inside the auditorium lasted far longer than anyone expected. Students who once laughed at Emily Carter now sat staring toward the stage with expressions filled by guilt, shock, and disbelief. Some teachers quietly wiped tears from their eyes while Principal Harris stood near the podium looking visibly emotional himself. But even after Daniel Whitmore's powerful words about poverty and dignity echoed through the room, nobody realized the biggest moment was still waiting to unfold. Daniel allowed the applause to settle slowly before speaking again. This time, his attention shifted directly toward Emily sitting quietly near the back row. For several seconds, the entire auditorium followed his gaze until hundreds of students finally turned toward her as well. Emily immediately froze under the sudden attention, her heart pounding with nervous uncertainty. Then Daniel smiled gently before saying words that would completely change her life forever. "Emily Carter," he said clearly into the microphone, "would you please come join me on stage?" The auditorium became silent again as Emily slowly stood from her seat. Her legs felt weak walking toward the front of the room while hundreds of students watched her differently than they had only days earlier. There was no mocking laughter this time. No whispers. No phones raised to humiliate her. Instead, people moved quietly aside allowing her through while many avoided eye contact entirely out of shame for how they treated her before. Emily climbed the steps toward the stage trembling slightly, still unable to fully understand what was happening. Daniel waited patiently beside Principal Harris until she finally reached them. Up close, Emily noticed something comforting in Daniel's expression. He did not look at her with pity. He looked at her with respect. And after everything she endured during the past week, that difference meant more than anyone around them could truly understand. Daniel reached for a folder resting on the podium beside him before turning back toward the crowd. When I first learned about Emily's story, he began calmly, I intended to help privately through the Whitmore Foundation Scholarship Program. Emily glanced toward him surprised because this was the first time she had heard him explain his thoughts publicly. But after seeing the strength this young woman showed while facing humiliation most adults could not survive emotionally, Daniel paused briefly, looking toward Emily with genuine admiration. I realized ordinary support was not enough. The auditorium remained completely still. Students leaned forward quietly waiting to hear what he meant. Then Daniel opened the folder slowly and continued speaking. Today, I am officially announcing that the Whitmore Foundation will fully sponsor Emily Carter's education through university. For a moment, Emily could not breathe. The words barely felt real even after hearing them aloud. Full university sponsorship. Tuition. Books. Housing. Everything. The dream she spent years believing was impossible suddenly stood directly in front of her while hundreds of students watched in stunned silence. Tears filled her eyes instantly as emotion overwhelmed her completely. She thought about her mother working endless overnight shifts cleaning office buildings while hiding back pain just to survive. She thought about candlelit nights studying beside apartment windows because electricity had been shut off again. She thought about standing outside the school gate praying simply to earn enough money for groceries. And now somehow, impossibly, her future had changed within a single moment. The same school auditorium where students once whispered cruel jokes about her now erupted into overwhelming applause louder than before. Several students stood up clapping. Teachers followed. Even some parents attending the assembly wiped tears from their faces. Then the auditorium doors near the back quietly opened, and another emotional moment unfolded unexpectedly. Emily turned toward the entrance and saw her mother standing there frozen in shock. Principal Harris had contacted her earlier that morning requesting she come to the school immediately without explaining why. She arrived nervous and confused, expecting bad news involving her daughter. Instead, she walked into an auditorium filled with applause while hearing Daniel Whitmore announce full sponsorship for Emily's future education. Her hands covered her mouth instantly as tears streamed down her face. Emily broke down completely the moment she saw her mother crying proudly near the back doors. Without thinking, she rushed off stage toward her while the crowd continued applauding around them. Mother and daughter embraced tightly in the center aisle while students watched one of the most emotional moments Westbridge High had ever witnessed. Even Principal Harris looked away briefly trying to compose himself. And in a twist nobody expected only days earlier, the same school gate where Emily Carter was mocked publicly had now become the beginning of her miracle. Students who laughed at her selling peanuts outside the fence were now watching her future transform in front of their eyes because she refused to quit during the hardest moment of her life. But perhaps the most shocking moment of all came next. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Jason Miller stood up from his seat near the middle section of the auditorium. The room quieted immediately noticing him move. Jason's face looked pale with emotion and embarrassment. For the first time since this entire situation began, the confidence and arrogance people associated with him had completely disappeared. He looked like someone finally forced to confront the damage his cruelty caused another human being publicly. Jason walked slowly toward the stage microphone while students watched silently. Even Emily turned toward him uncertainly. For several uncomfortable seconds, Jason struggled finding words. Then finally, his voice cracked slightly as he spoke. Emily, he began quietly, staring down toward the floor before forcing himself to continue. I was wrong. The room remained completely silent. What I did to you was cruel. I thought it was funny at the time because I never understood what your life was actually like. Jason swallowed hard before continuing. I embarrassed you in front of the whole school and online because I wanted attention. And I'm sorry. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Hundreds of students simply watched, waiting to see how Emily would respond. Emily stood silently for several moments, staring at the same boy who publicly humiliated her days earlier beside the school gate. She remembered every cruel laugh. Every painful comment. Every tear she cried afterward alone inside her bathroom at home. She had every reason to reject his apology completely. But then she looked toward her mother standing nearby, crying softly with pride. She remembered Daniel Whitmore's words about dignity. And quietly, through tears still filling her eyes, Emily nodded gently. I forgive you, she said. The simplicity of those words hit the auditorium harder than anyone expected. Some students began crying openly. Others clapped softly again. Because in that moment, Emily Carter demonstrated something even more powerful than intelligence or resilience. She showed grace towards someone who never showed grace to her. And years later, people at Westbridge High would still remember the day the girl mocked for selling peanuts outside the school gate became the person who taught everyone else what true strength actually looked like. Years passed after the day that changed Emily Carter's life forever at Westbridge High School. The viral video that once humiliated her slowly disappeared from public memory, replaced instead by another story people across the city began sharing with admiration. Teachers spoke about her determination to younger students. Parents mentioned her name during conversations about perseverance and resilience. And little by little, the girl once mocked beside the school gate became a symbol of something far greater than anyone imagined during that rainy afternoon years earlier. With the support of the Whitmore Foundation, Emily graduated near the top of her class before earning admission into one of the most respected universities in the state. The same student who once studied under candlelight in a tiny apartment now walked across college campuses carrying dreams that no longer felt impossible. But despite everything changing around her, Emily never forgot where her journey truly began. University life introduced Emily to opportunities she once believed only existed for other people. She met professors who encouraged her ambitions. She traveled outside her hometown for the first time. She no longer worried about choosing between buying textbooks or helping her mother pay bills. Yet even while her future expanded in ways she could barely imagine before, Emily carried the memory of humiliation carefully inside her heart because it reminded her who she never wanted to become. Daniel Whitmore remained part of her life throughout those years, mentoring her quietly and reminding her often that success meant very little if it only benefited yourself. Emily remembered those lessons deeply. Every time she passed students struggling financially on campus, she saw pieces of her younger self reflected in them. Every time she heard someone mocked for circumstances beyond their control, she remembered standing outside the school gate holding back tears while classmates laughed around her. Those memories no longer filled her with shame. Instead, they gave her purpose. Several years later, after graduating from university with honors, Emily made a decision that surprised many people around her. Instead of leaving her hometown behind permanently, she returned to the same community where her struggles once felt unbearable. By then, life looked completely different. Her mother no longer worked exhausting overnight cleaning jobs because Emily finally earned enough to support them comfortably. They moved into a small but peaceful home far away from the apartment where overdue bills and empty refrigerators once controlled their lives. For the first time in many years, her mother smiled without exhaustion hidden behind it. And although Emily could have focused entirely on building a successful career for herself alone, she felt drawn back toward the very place where her pain once became public entertainment. One quiet afternoon, nearly 7 years after the incident outside Westbridge High School, Emily stood once again near the same school gate where students once mocked her publicly for selling peanuts beside the sidewalk. But this time everything was different. The old wooden tray she once carried was gone. The fear that once followed her every afternoon had disappeared completely. Instead, Emily arrived carrying boxes filled with school supplies, food packages, and scholarship applications for struggling students in the area. Through support from Daniel Whitmore and several local organizations, she had created a small educational assistance program designed specifically for children from low-income families. Students who once believed poverty automatically disqualified them from dreaming bigger now found someone standing before them who understood their pain personally. Someone who survived it. Someone who refused to let them face it alone. As Emily walked slowly past the school entrance that afternoon, memories flooded back into her mind with painful clarity. She remembered the rain falling against the sidewalk. Jason Miller laughing while students recorded her humiliation. The feeling of wanting to disappear completely because shame felt too heavy to survive publicly. But standing there years later, she realized something important. The worst moment of her life had also become the beginning of everything that followed afterward. If that painful afternoon never happened, Daniel Whitmore may never have noticed her. If students never mocked her publicly, she may never have discovered how strong she truly was inside. Somehow, through pain she once begged God to remove from her life, a completely different future had quietly been forming all along. And perhaps the most emotional moment came when several students from Westbridge High approached Emily near the gate asking for advice about college, scholarships, and difficult family situations at home. One young girl admitted quietly that her family was struggling financially and she felt embarrassed working part-time after school. Emily listened carefully before smiling gently in a way that reminded many people of Daniel Whitmore years earlier. "There is nothing shameful about helping your family survive," she told her softly. "Never let anyone make you feel small for fighting through hard times." The girl nodded tearfully while clutching the scholarship information Emily handed her. In that moment, the cycle of kindness continued forward once again. Because sometimes, the people who suffer the deepest wounds become the very reason someone else survives theirs. Emily Carter's story was never really about peanuts, poverty, or viral humiliation. It became a story about faith during hopeless seasons. About perseverance when giving up feels easier. About kindness in a world where cruelty often spreads faster than compassion. And years after students laughed at a poor girl standing outside a school gate, that same girl returned not with anger or revenge in her heart, but with enough grace to lift others out of the darkness she once survived herself. Have you ever been judged because of a struggle nobody else understood? Maybe it was the clothes you wore. Maybe it was where you came from. Maybe people looked at your situation and decided your future before you ever had the chance to prove them wrong. Emily Carter understood that pain better than most people ever will. She knew what it felt like to carry embarrassment in silence while trying to survive one difficult day at a time. She knew what it felt like to smile in public while secretly wondering if life would ever become easier. But her story also reminds us of something powerful. Your current situation does not decide your final destination. Sometimes the moments meant to break you completely become the very moments God uses to change your life forever. And if you were standing in Emily Carter's position that day outside the school gate, would you have forgiven the people who laughed at you publicly? Would you have shown grace to someone like Jason Miller after all the humiliation he caused? Let us know honestly in the comments below, because stories like this remind us how differently people respond to pain, forgiveness, and second chances. And if Emily's journey touched your heart in any way today, take a moment to share this story with someone who may be struggling silently right now. You never truly know how close someone is to giving up. And finally, If you enjoy powerful real-life stories about perseverance, faith, resilience, and unexpected moments that change lives forever, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Because sometimes one story, one act of kindness, or one moment of encouragement can completely change the direction of someone's life forever.
That brings us to the end of this movie. This is not just an entertainment, it's a reminder for both parents and children that kindness can change someone's life forever. And to parents, please never stop encouraging your children, because your prayer, your words, and your support can give them strength to survive seasons they never talked about openly. Your children how to respect people no matter their financial situation, because character matter more than words. And if this story touch your heart, please don't forget to like, don't forget to comment letting me know where you are watching from, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more powerful emotional story that inspire faith and hope. Thank you.